Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. Estimates suggest as many as 1 in 3 adults are using generative artificial intelligence chatbots to support their mental and emotional health. The chatbots and wellness apps are also popular with younger users, including teenagers. In some instances, people, including teens, have relied so heavily on these tech tools that they're describing them as friends or even romantic partners. But experts caution that while this kind of technology can be useful, it's limited and should not be substituted for actual intervention by a trained human practitioner, especially for people in mental health crisis. This week, we've been looking at different types of AI and its impact across Northeast Ohio as part of our IdeaStream Explores Artificial Intelligence series. This topic is part of that series. Later in the show, we'll hear from the author of Flourish, a new book about living your most meaningful, fulfilled life. But first, we'll ask experts to weigh in on AI use in mental health and relationships, including why this is gaining traction and whether it's capable of meeting human emotional needs. Joining me today by phone, we have Dr. Kelly Merrill. He's an assistant professor of communication at the University of Cincinnati. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We also have Dr. Susan Albers joining us by phone. She's a clinical psychologist at the Cleveland Clinic. Susan, welcome to the Sound of Ideas.
Thank you so much.
And also joining us by phone, we have S. Lee. He's the founder of May, an AI-powered messaging and coaching app that many use for advice on friendships and relationships, among other things. S, welcome to the Sound of Ideas.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Now, if you'd like to be part of this conversation, you can call us. That number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org or send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. If you have experience with using AI technology in a personal capacity, we'd love to hear from you, or maybe you just have some thoughts or a question for our panel. Kelly? Let's start the conversation with you. There are a lot of chatbot options available to the public, and you've been studying how these technologies impact lives. So what are you finding?
Yeah, so like you said, there are so many that exist nowadays that it's kind of hard to trace specifically across one different app or one different tool. But generally, what we've seen is that a lot of people are going online to receive some type of mental health support from a chatbot, generative AI in some way. And we are seeing, at least in the short term, that these are generally positive effects, right? That we are going online, we are talking with these chatbots whenever we are doing so, and that it's ultimately helping us with providing emotional support in that one time point. So that's generally what we see across a multitude of research studies.
As we think about this, Kelly, and how this is developed, and people hear the word AI and might get a little nervous or might get a little excited, but there's been a lot of opportunities on the internet for people to connect. Is this kind of just a new spin on something that's been around for a while?
I agree that it certainly does feel like it's a new spin. I often make the comparison between AOL about 15 years ago when people were online talking with another. It feels as if you're talking in a chat room to a person. It feels like you're having a conversation with them. You never meet that person. And so it's kind of simulating, if you will, that same experience. And so we do see that a lot of people are making attributions to the chatbot, whichever one they're talking to, in ways that they would as another human in a online chat room on social media. And so I would say yes, it's very similar to that.
I remember the chat room being asked ASL, age, sex, location. It did kind of have a romantic sort of underpinning to it when you were thinking about making those connections, at least in my mind, as I was experiencing that back then. Now, Susan, the need for mental health support, it's more accepted today than it's been in the past, but there can still be stigma. Do you think that plays into the popularity of chatbots aimed at mental health support specifically?
Chatbots are giving us many pros and cons and access to mental health. One of the pros is that it increases access 24/7 and it does reduce some of the stigma. For individuals who may be uncomfortable with therapy or it's their first time, it can be a way of entering into the chatbot world, getting some education. It can be a bridge to therapy for someone who doesn't have access. We have seen, though, a lot of concerns about the safety and about how people can connect. In particular, we're worried about the safety and privacy and how this may be addressed. And for a clinician, what we know about therapy is what is truly healing is sitting with the individual who is providing empathy and non-judgment. So as you're saying, the stigma can be reduced because so many more people are accessing AI and entering and are curious about mental health.
Now, S, you are the founder of May, that's MEI. That's an AI tool that offers relationship coaching, among other things. What kind of conversations are you seeing your users have with this technology?
Most of our users basically use it to ask the question or have a conversation that they wouldn't have with another person. And a lot of this is related to health, and within that, mostly sex, because a lot of questions about it, honestly, in online forums and on websites, there isn't any place to get education on that. So we're finding a lot of behavior where the very first interaction is almost like dismissive, right? And when the AI comes back with something that seems to have listened, we've noticed people's conversations start getting deeper and deeper. And I think that's, in a way, that's very human. Yeah. The first time you might go to a therapist or talking to a friend about a problem, you're not jumping right into it, right? And I think it's emulating a lot of that behavior, which I agree is an outlet for people who wouldn't otherwise have a resource. And I think there's a lot of talk about how, you know, can AI replace, professionals? But the reality is 99% of people don't have a professional that they could talk to. So it's not replacing them. And for that 1%, right, stay with the professional. But everybody else there could use a tool that allows them to almost get a taste of what it's like to have someone or something on the other side that's listening to what they're saying and responding appropriately. So I think it's a first for many people, and I think that's a great thing because, you know, ultimately they always have a choice. Do I go to a human? Do I go to an AI? And I think with AI, that optionality is now opening up for the masses.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about AI use in mental health, also in relationships, whether that be relationship coaching or also developing a friendship or a romantic relationship in some cases with an artificial intelligence generative AI chatbot. If you want to be a part of this conversation, the number to call is 866 578 0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. S, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned there with people asking questions that they are not able to find the answers to easily. As someone who works in making these items available to people, where are these chatbots pulling information from? We know that generative AI builds responses from certain data that it can find access to online. But in terms of these specific instances, where's the input coming from that they're able then to send out to people who are users?
Yeah, so we use a range of large language models, and these are, the major names that you hear about, OpenAI, Claude, Gemini. And it's worth talking about where these models got their information. It's basically from artifacts of human beings, right? So everything that's been on the internet, published in a paper, movie scripts, and increasingly, these AI model companies will have their own bespoke data sets, which may have actually a lot came out of the conversations with AI, right? You start to get half of that conversation as a human artifact. And when we think about the behavior of this AI, and there's a lot of talk about bias, and I think it's worth understanding that everything about AI is bias. It's basically predicting, if you ask the question, predicting what that answer should be, right? And if you talk about, that along gender lines, because there's been, a lot of talk about bias in if you ask AI to generate an image of a doctor versus a nurse, doctor's male, nurse is female, right? but it kind of reflects what the training data was. And so if you kind of extrapolate that and say, okay, how the AI responds to this, it's kind of a function of what they call a prompt, right? So if I said, "How are you today?" You're gonna say, "Okay, you know, I'm fine," right? But what I just said was the prompt. And so if, the behavior of AI these AI chatbots is really largely up to the creator that uses these large language models to overlay their prompt. You are an AI therapist, or you are a friend, or a thought partner, right? So, in a way, it's controlled almost. The source is from the broader public that has posted information online. That's condensed. There's a layer from the AI model companies, and then there's a layer after that, which is the product owner.
Susan, there's an advisory from the American Psychological Association, and it's warning about users getting sucked into an unhealthy relationship with these particular types of generative AI because generative AI is often engineered for maximum user engagement. And that's been something that's been likened to the infinite scroll, how maybe, when you're on a social media app, there's another video or another post that comes up automatically and it auto plays and it captures and holds your attention. Do you have a concern about that when it comes to that focus of this particular type of technology, maybe instead of a necessarily good medical outcome or healthy outcome for users?
With my own clients, I often first gauge what is their relationship with AI. And it's a quite wide range. I have some clients that I mention AI and they're deer in headlights. They've not touched it, they're afraid of it, they haven't gone there. And then at the other end of the extreme, particularly with younger clients, they will say things like, "It is my best friend, it is my companion, it is my confidant." And sometimes that can be a red flag for me as a therapist because it really suggests that this could be replacing some of their human connection. And what is really healing, and over time, we know that loneliness has become a little bit of an epidemic in our world, that AI may be replacing some of that human connection and support that people need. So it's developed in a way, according to research, that it can become addictive. So it is a concern, and we need a lot more research about the relationship that people develop with their AI, how to use it in a safe way, and in the future, making sure that it does not replicate some of the harmful effects that we see with social media and addiction.
Which we
What
are still learning
is
very
also,
much about. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
we're still learning. And one of the things that stands out for us as therapists is that the clinical judgment is missing in many cases, in that AI, if someone is developing an addictive relationship, it may not recognize that. It may not be able to point out trauma or manage a crisis or suicidal thoughts or really concerning clinical behaviors. So if someone is talking only exclusively to an AI model, this could be really harmful or put them in jeopardy in a lot of different ways.
Let's stay on that topic of people in crisis, Susan. The American Psychological Association warns against using AI chatbots if you are in health crisis. So let's break that down. What constitutes being in health crisis, and what do you think about using AI for support in a time like that?
A crisis would be an individual who's having suicidal thoughts. They may be having health issues. They may be extremely isolated, some dissociation, or particularly the suicidal thoughts are of main concern. And an AI chat box may not be able to, and likely would not be able to, direct you to some emergency services. So in those situations, it would really not be appropriate. You really need a mental health professional who's going to help you to access the right resources in those particular situations. AI can be helpful. It can be a support to well-being, but not replace the therapist. We can use it in situations that are more in regards to coaching or helping with communication, teaching skills, education. Where we may need a therapist on board is when there is a mental health crisis that is happening. And we know that that can be difficult or even extremely difficult for an AI bot chat to pick up on. And a relationship with the therapist over time, you may see some of those red flags or signs that, for example, a client may be not show up to therapy or things that they're not saying are big red flags, whereas an AI model may be difficult to pick up on that.
Kelly, we have seen instances where parents have blamed chatbots for children having deaths by suicide. And I want to ask you, in your research, how are you feeling about safeguards in chatbots now that this concern has been raised? Are they there? Are they developing? Is it something that needs to be discussed?
Oh, absolutely. I think these are certainly something that we need to be discussing a lot further. I think the safeguards that currently exist are not great enough. We've seen a lot of parents really talking about this with their children in terms of going online, talking with chatbots, and either not being able to know what those conversations are, not being able to monitor them, or not understanding essentially what is being said between the child and the chatbot. And ultimately, as you've said, some cases where children have committed suicide. And so, in those cases, I think these chatbots, they're built off of these large language models, these algorithms that are strong and powerful. That they have the sense that they're potentially talking to a minor, or that they have the sense that this person is getting closer and closer to potentially taking their own life. And so, I personally think that a lot of these companies that are creating these tools have to do so much more in implementing safeguards. They need to put out notices and saying, this is not appropriate for you to be using here. Here are some other local resources that maybe you can take advantage of instead. Or it seems like you're in a mental health crisis, as we were just talking about. Instead of talking to a chatbot, which we are not designed to support in those instances, maybe you should be talking to a mental health professional instead. So I think there's so many more safeguards that can be put into place. The problem is that the technology is evolving so much faster than the research can even get out there. Is that by the time that we figure out something that has happened maybe in 2024, we're already in 2026 with the brand new thing that's happening with far more advanced tools like these.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about human relationships with generative artificial intelligence. We're talking about people using chatbots for mental health support, developing friendships that they're calling them with these chatbots, also even developing romantic relationships in some instances. If you've used an AI chatbot for a medical need or a personal need, or you have questions or a comment and want to join the conversation, the number to call is 866 578 0903. And you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Now, as we think about the kind of relationships that people are building with generative AI, what do you say to people who are worried that relationships like this can create a dangerous feedback loop based on generative AI being designed to agree with the user?
I think the generative AI being designed to agree with the user is a simple prompt, right? And of course, a lot of the product makers would say, okay, well, I want them to have a positive experience, right? So they go, okay, let's make this sycophantic, right? Because there's an appeal to that. That's very much within the product owner's control. And I would kind of like to challenge this question about safety in AI because it seems like we're applying a standard that we don't apply anywhere else. And what I mean by that is when we talk about safety, the what people can get access to on the internet is not safe, right? There's pros and cons of that. And in a way, I also kind of challenge certain crises should be handled by a therapist or a professional. And I'd like people to think about, okay, what percentage of the population does talk to a therapist when they do have suicidal thoughts, right? And I think the accessibility question is really important to kind of weigh the pros and cons because I've always said that, if you think about AI and everything that's written about it, if you did a find and replace on everything that's been written about AI and replace that with the next generation of children, everything will make sense, right? They're having my child is having a relationship with the next generation of children. My my job may be taken by the next generation of children. And so, if looked in that lens, we say, for anybody going through a crisis, what is their alternative? And they know that there are mental health resources. They don't reach out because the hurdle for getting the help, by the way, they don't even know what they need, right? All I know is I don't feel great, right? And if you can lower that hurdle, if AI is almost the equivalent of the web search, the beginning, the early days of the internet, right? Like WebMD, everybody was their own doctor, right? And doctors hated it because everybody was saying, well, I think I have this, right? But net was that positive for the public to at least start doing their own research, right? To almost have the tools to take their own well-being into their own hands. And I think, yes, there's going to be misdiagnoses, there's going to be edge cases, but by and large, having that option is a good thing for the public. And I think it's, when people talk about safety, I always question, what do you mean by safety, right? Because if it's talking to an AI chatbot and it feels like it's understanding them, if it wasn't for the AI chatbot there, they would talk to a friend, right? And would the friend answer as responsibly to to them as an AI? And we've had an opportunity to look at a lot of these transcripts, right? And see that like even when people ask certain things that they knew were kind of trollish, right? Most of the answers that came back from the AI was better than what a person would say. So I think it's important to think about, okay, well, this isn't perfect, but is it better than the alternative right now? And I think, we can all say, should this happen? Should we regulate? Should we, what should we do? But the reality is people are going to go, look on the internet for certain things, right? And we can try to be parents as much as we like about it. But ultimately, that's not going to make a difference.
We have an email now in from Tom. Tom writes, would you fall in love with your calculator with an Excel sheet? No? Then don't fall in love with the chatbot. It's a tool. I talk to chatbots when I have a very long and complex question that usually has a very specific process as the desired answer. I think that is their best use. Fact check answers and double check their math. That is from Tom. Tom, thank you for writing into the Sound of Ideas. If you want to send us a comment or a question, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org or call 866-578-0903 as we continue to talk about human relationships with AI chatbots. I'll stay with you for this next question, which is along the lines of these romantic relationships that we're seeing reported with AI chatbots. Some people have described their relationship as romantic with these chatbots. As many as 1 in 5 teens actually say that either they or someone they know has developed either a friendship or a romantic relationship with an AI chatbot. So what do you think about people choosing this experience?
Well, I think if they had a certain need and there's something on the other side that satisfies that, right? And look, if using the internet equivalent, it's porn, right? And you would say porn replaces, some things that you do with a live human, right? So I think it's really the choice of the user. And a lot of the outcome of these conversations is emotions, right? Sometimes emotional connection. We have a lot of people talk with the AI and by the end of it say, I love you. That started the conversation with exactly what Tom wrote about. Hey, I need you as a calculator, right? I need some career advice, right? And that conversation kind of evolves. And there's stories about people falling in love with your therapist, right? And whether it's a human on the other side or it's an AI, does it really matter if this person got the thing that they need? And that may be the kind of stepping stone for actual human interaction, right? So like role playing is actually a use case that grows a lot, that is growing a lot. I think I saw some statistic that like, Gen Z and younger, like a portion of all their emails, before they send it, they've run it through AI first as a almost sanity check, right? And so when you think about having an AI girlfriend, I mean, people know what it is on the other side. If they don't have any experience with the girlfriend, the AI is almost the perfect role-playing partner to be like, okay, well, you know, like this is low stakes, right? And so I kind of feel like it, you know, we think so much in a binary, where if it's this, then it's not that. But throughout our lives, our day to day, like we have so many options for everything. Having yet another option on AI, it's not for everybody, but the people who do, it clearly fills in a gap that isn't there, that isn't being served.
We have a call now from Pat in Lakewood. Pat, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I think that one of your guests, the one who keeps minimizing the risk and the danger, is missing the whole point. The individual young child who has this relationship with the chatbot is having a relationship with something that's not human. And we can see this with teenagers on their phones. They're in a group, there's 4 of them, but not one of them is talking face to face to the others. They're all on their screens. And I think it's very dangerous for somebody who's in a health crisis to be talking to something that has no empathy, has no understanding, has no rationalization of human emotions and risks, when instead they could be talking to a friend, a relative, a neighbor, a parent, and those people would likely understand a lot better. And he's right. Probably 95% of the people don't get psychological counseling, but they do talk to human beings. And I think that the human contact is critical. And without that, we're going to have all sorts of problems with this technology.
Thanks for that comment, Pat. Susan, I want to ask you about this. We're kind of talking about this as a choice, but it might not be a choice for everyone. So what do you think about AI being available for people who maybe are lacking those emotional, mental relationship support systems? And how does that fit into what you would hope to see ideally happen with generative AI and people looking to it for support?
I think that Tom named it very well in that this is a tool, not a relationship. A relationship is when you have a connection with another individual and there's back and forth. When you are talking to a chat box, it's one way. You are not getting the support or sharing on the other side, and that's what really constitutes a relationship, as well as the emotional attunement, being able to read the person next to you, their emotions. 80% of our communication is body language. So you cannot see the person's eyes, how they move, the tone of their voice, and that is all missed. And that's critical to our relationship. In regards to access, it can be an entryway for many people. It can be very expensive to access therapy. There are wait lists. It can be difficult for people to access therapists. And this is sort of a issue that evolved from the pandemic, that after the pandemic, we saw an increase in people feeling very isolated, lonely, and needing support. And so in many ways, we need more access to therapists. And this can be one supportive tool, but something that should not replace a relationship. And we particularly see this with young children. There's a discomfort with vulnerability. And when you're sitting across from a computer, it lacks that. A therapist can help you to be seen, to be known. You challenge them, you hold them accountable. And so this is a key aspect that's missing or could be missing in the relationship that someone has. Again, not a relationship, it's a tool. And a tool is something that we can use for education. We can use it. I use it in my own therapy practice to help clients to create habit trackers. We look at it in terms of helping people to get education around how does anxiety work? How does the stress response work? And I think it's going to be something that can be helpful in between sessions. As a therapist, we're really looking at ways in which we can use AI to help to expand therapy, to help it to be more effective. And so we're really at the beginning. It's developing very quickly. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. But at this point, we're really looking at ways, particularly as therapists, that I can teach my clients how to use it in safe, appropriate ways. And so that's where my clinical focus has been in teaching and talking with clients of what the boundaries and guidelines are, and particularly with teenage clients.
I wish we had 2 hours for this conversation. Unfortunately, we don't. So, as we start to wrap things up here, even though there are a million other things I would like to get to, Kelly, I want to ask you, in your research, you've come across people who are not excited about artificial intelligence and generative AI, and they're not buying into it. What have you learned about people who are resisting this technology?
Yeah, I mean, there are a multitude of reasons why people are resisting these technologies. One is just privacy. People are concerned about what goes online. I mean, we hear about data breaches all the time. And so they're concerned about what they're putting into a chatbot that, or generative AI that could potentially be taking their data and selling it elsewhere or presenting it elsewhere. I mean, we've seen so many cases where you can Google something in one setting, and then later you see an ad for the same thing on a different device or even on the same device but a different platform. And so a lot of people are really concerned about that privacy aspect. I've even had people concerned about, we were talking about this earlier, but the bias, right? The fact that a lot of these large language models are trained on not necessarily marginalized populations or underrepresented populations, and so it might not be offering the best response or the best advice to those that are limited in their accesses to these tools and such. And so those are ultimately some things that we have to think about. I mean, absolutely, I do agree that there and people have acknowledged in my own research that there's benefit and in the short term, but as we've seen with some of these longer term uses of AI, it gets into same thing as problematic internet use, problematic social media use. Now we have problematic AI use that people are now relying on it for so much more. And I just wanted to reiterate something that Susan has said is that so much of communication is nonverbal, right? Between 80 to even upwards of like 93% of communication can be nonverbal. And so ultimately, would you want something to only have between 7 to 20% of the full story when it's providing all of these resources to you for a long period of time? Or is that just okay for a couple moments, as what we've seen a lot for the most part?
I wonder if that will have a change in those statistics, the introduction of generative AI in communication. Maybe we will be relying less on those nonverbal communication cues. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the conversation. I do want to thank our panel for participating: Dr. Susan Albers of the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Kelly Merrill of the University of Cincinnati, and S. Lee, founder of the May app. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
IdeaStream Explorers will be reporting on various aspects of AI and its impact on Northeast Ohio all week long. You can hear the reporting on WKSU right here, and you can find it online at ideastream.org. We'll also be continuing conversations about this tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas. And right now, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll give you a front row seat to a Northeast Ohio writer's quest to find out how people across the globe flourish and hear what he's learned from that journey. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. There's no shortage of self-help books out there. With the tap of a button, you can order up advice on how to become a better communicator, how to stop smoking, maybe how to become a better parent or a better spouse. And now you can even seek out an entire book on lessons on how to flourish. That's thanks to author Daniel Coyle. Daniel is an author that splits time between Homer, Alaska, and Cleveland Heights. Both communities, he argues, create spaces that allow people to thrive. In his new book, Flourish: The Art of Building Meaning, Joy, and Fulfillment, he's found what he argues are flourishing, encouraging commonalities between Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, the town of Norwich, Connecticut, and former Guardians coach Terry Francona. Daniel speaks tomorrow night at the Parma Snow branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library at 7 p.m. and joins us now in studio to talk about his new book. Daniel, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. It's fun to be here.
We appreciate it. If you want to join this conversation, if you have a question about flourishing, or maybe you want to share your own story of flourishing, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can email us at soi@ideastream.org and send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Daniel, you've written a lot about how people can perform at their best. Why did you choose the topic, the word flourish, for this book?
Deep down, it's because it's what we're all looking for. It's the big thing. It's joyful, meaningful growth. Not mere worldly success, but joyful, meaningful growth. And so it leads to a question, which is, where's that happening in today's sped up, mixed up world? And so I spent 5 years looking for places that embodied it, that were generative, joyful, meaningful connection. And I had two big surprises. The first surprise is nobody's doing it alone. You know, we talk about self-help, but what I found in these places was shared help. What I found in these places was community. And the second big surprise is that they were all kind of doing it the same way. They were doing this thing where they would sort of pause and create deep connection. And then they would explore together and make a little mess and do a project and collective agency. So that's what it sort of comes down to, is like these moments of mattering, these moments of meaning, and then this shared exploration. And that's kind of the heartbeat of these different places.
So that sense that you arrived at, that it's bigger than the self when you're trying to find the ability to flourish or the best scenario to make that the most possible.
Yeah.
In your journey, you said 5 years working on this book.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to arrive at the conclusion that it is a larger sense outside the self to lead to flourishing?
Way too longer than it should have. I mean, I grew up as a writer, you operate alone. I grew up in a culture of great individualism, you know, where we sort of thought you think about geniuses and think about heroes and think about great leaders. But whenever you scratch the surface on those stories, they're always standing on a community, on an ecosystem. We're sort of told the story of like, well, life's a game and the best players move on up and they win, right? But when you actually look at their life at a slightly larger lens, what you always find is like these relationships, these connections. And we're pre-wired for them. That's the cool part, because like if you and I were to do a contest right now and we did it individually and we did it shared, our brains would light up way more at shared success than individual success. So what these places have in common is sort of a turn toward each other and also toward problems. Like solving problems together ends up being kind of the DNA of these places. But we're really trained in this day and age, and we're sold everything this day and age on a very individualized basis. So in some places, it's almost like we lack the instincts and the language, and we have to kind of remember how to be a community. And some of these places I visited were really good at kind of creating the conditions where they could pay attention in ways that activated that community.
One scenario you talk about in your book really had no choice but to pay attention to the value of community. I'm talking about the 33 Chilean miners who were trapped in a mine collapse in 2010, which you focus on in your book. And the miners were rescued after 69 days. They were in relatively good spirits. Tell us what that taught you about flourishing and what we should take away from that.
Yeah, if we had to trade places with anybody on the planet, there would not be those 33 guys. That's a tough
No, I
spot,
don't
right?
think
That's
so.
a tough spot. And when they first emerged, we all remember they emerged with great camaraderie and togetherness after enduring incredible privation, no food, obviously darkness, disease. And the original story that came out was, it was great leadership. It was great leadership. And then, but the second wave of research that went through showed that what happened were these particular moments where they created meaning together, where they created what I would call mattering together, which is where you're seeing value in the person across from you, and you're also connecting to something bigger that you can add value to. And so those moments of surrendering, of letting go, and really that's the strange thing about this, is that we're sort of brought up with control everything and be focused and sort of approach life as a game. What they did in that moment was kind of to surrender to each other and figure out, okay, all of us are equal down here. How do we want to be together? What should the rules be? What rituals should we have? And they built this togetherness together. So it wasn't like some magic silver bullet. It's more like a practice. How can you practice sort of slowing down and paying deeper attention to the people around you in ways that gives them value and shows value and also connects you to something bigger at the same time?
You mentioned focus and the type of focus that people are practicing, I guess, for lack of a better word there. You interviewed a man named Ian McGilchrist in the book, and something you return to often related to that conversation with him is paying attention to things and focused attention versus broad awareness. So can you explain those differences and what that has to do with flourishing?
Yeah, I love that. It's really deep, and I was never taught it. We're taught that we have one form of attention. Like you have one form of attention. It's called focus. That's what attention is. That's actually wrong. It's sort of wrong. We actually have two forms of attention. One is task attention, very narrow, very controlling, which is designed evolutionarily because we want to find food, grab it, identify it, eat it, categorize it, control it. But there's also another form of attention, which is much broader and much deeper, and it's built around connection and nuance. And the trick is they can't both be switched on at once. There's only one. So the moment when you sort of let go of control and say, what is this really? What's going on here? What is this person? Where are we headed? That curiosity, that openness that these places have in common, where they're not trying to control each other. And it's kind of ironic because, we all sort of have a sense today that we're in a bit of an attentional crisis, phones in schools, and our attention has been sort of fractured and fragmented by all of this technology we're surrounded by all the time. And yet we don't have a model of attentional health. And I think in some ways that's what these ideas give us. The idea that, this narrow focus is sort of like sugar. Like, it's fine, but if you want to be attentionally healthy, it's good to understand that the building blocks of attention is not just one thing, it's actually two things. And those restorative moments when we slow down, open up, have ritual, pause, really let go of control a little bit, end up being the most kind of attentionally nourishing moments you can have.
Interesting. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking with author Daniel Coyle, and his new book is called Flourish, The Art of Building Meaning, Joy, and Fulfillment. So we're talking about just that, flourishing, and how we can all get a little bit better at it. If you want to give us a call to be a part of this conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. Now, Daniel, in the book, you cite multiple studies throughout the book and experiments, some scientific data to kind of back up the things that you're talking about in the book. You also talk about the idea of the beautiful mess, which is something that you started talking about when we began this conversation today. People flourishing in those messy conditions. So how can we combine the two? Those things sort of seem a bit dichotomous to me, data and science, beautiful mess.
I know.
How do those work together to get us to flourish?
I know. Well, the thing to realize is that we're sort of taught and trained to be a little allergic to mess. We want our projects to be neat. We want our dinner tables to be tidy. We want our days to be tightly time boxed. And yet when we were talking about, if you want to grow, I think you have to accept the fact that machines are really clean, but actual growth is messy. Toddlers are messy, and they're really important phase to go through. There's something called complex dynamic systems theory that really captures this, but the basic idea is that the mess isn't the obstacle. The mess is the doorway. If you're going to build anything, if you're going to create anything new, you kind of have to disrupt the existing order and shake it up a little bit. And I have to say, as a Clevelander, I never met anybody who was better at it than Terry Francona. The guy, he was messy.
And you worked with Terry Francona. You worked with the Guardians for 10 years. So you've got experience there.
Still am. This is my 13th year as a consultant, part-time. It's sort of like a permanent intern, basically, is my role. But I get a front row seat to sort of how they're doing it. And the Guardians are kind of a remarkable organization. If people have been noticing, they don't have a very high payroll, but they have won almost as many games as the New York Yankees, and they've spent $1.3 billion less than the Yankees. So they're doing more with less. They're creating something new. They're adding up to more. And they do that. I think, there was always a time when Terry was the manager that the season would be getting a little bit out of control and not performing so well, and everybody would want him to whip the guys into shape. But he always was very patient about that. He always sort of let the team assemble itself. He endured the mess so that it could self-organize. And self-organization, which is really agency, right? It's really somebody feeling efficacious and taking control. And we know in our own lives that that's a core need, that need for agency. So sure, you can whip things in your life into control, but it's much better, especially if you're in teams, especially if you're dealing with people, to create conditions with clear guardrails where they can navigate themselves and self-organize. That's one thing Terry was really great at. He just had, a small handful of rules. Be on time, respect the game, never back down from a challenge. But within that space, those are the guardrails. Within that space, organize yourself. How do you want to do it?
All of this sounds like it really does fall in line with that conversation about that individual focus versus the broader awareness type of mindset. So do you have any tips for people to practice that broader awareness?
Yeah. There's something called the yellow door that I really like that was an idea from University of Columbia, our Columbia University psychologist, Lisa Miller. We normally go through life like looking for green doors, meaning go, it's open, or red doors, meaning don't go here. And yellow doors, life gets a little bit more interesting when you start paying attention to yellow doors, which are signals that maybe, like an opportunity that might be there, might not be there. That's one powerful thing. And the other thing would be to sort of think about friction boosting. We normally look at friction as something in our lives that's to be avoided. And obviously we live in a whole world now that is absolutely built to isolate us and have us avoid all friction. And yet those moments of friction where there's a little vulnerability, where there's a mistake, where you're walking to the drugstore instead of having it delivered. Those create those little moments of interaction and connection that's what communities are made of.
Okay, WVIZ PBS is a platform here at IdeaStream Public Media. So I have to ask you, of course, about Mr. Rogers, which is mentioned in your book. You cite Fred Rogers as a person who allowed children to flourish. Why was that?
He was unique. I mean, that show, there were a lot of good TV programs led by a lot of very kind people at that time. But when Mr. Rogers was canceled, I think 3,000 mothers showed up saying, almost rioting, like, you don't want to get 3,000 mothers angry. And they did. They absolutely felt, people identified so closely with this television show. So when you look at the structure of that television show, what was he doing that was different? And it was creating this open, responsive space that allowed people's relational attention to click on. When you see normal kids television, a lot of it is frenetic, and it's this causes that, and it's very narrow focus. And this was something totally different. Whenever he said anything like, look over here, he would pause and wait for the kid to do that, and as if it was a living conversation. So he was creating these, I would call them awakening cues. And it created what we're built to create, which is deep connection. And the depth of his connection was built on such tiny moments. That was the beautiful thing about it. And I think that's the lesson to us all, that these little moments are huge. These little moments where you can shift your attention a few degrees. It's not a lot of stuff about sort of self-help is all about like transformation, like huge change. But the lesson in this book over and over again, it's like a slight rechanneling. It's not some massive change. It's like, let's take a second, look around, and connect to the people who are around us.
Speaking of connecting to the people around us, you mentioned an exercise that Mr. Rogers had people do. We've got about 2 minutes left. Do we have time for you to walk me through it?
You bet.
Okay, can you walk me through it? Let's do
He
it.
did this. He did this regularly. He did it especially at the Emmy Awards one year. So the picture of the crowd, all rich, famous actors. He said, all of us have people in our lives who have helped us get to where we are today. Some of them are alive. Some of them are gone. But would you just take 10 seconds with me right now, thinking about the people who loved you into being,
Okay.
the people in your life who loved you into being. And then he said, I'll keep the time.
Okay, so I'm starting now. I'm thinking internally. Should I be thinking out loud?
No, internally is it.
Okay.
Internally is it.
Yeah, these are some great memories that I'm thinking back on, people who have loved me into being.
And then whoever those people are, how thrilled they must be to see where you're at right now and what you're doing.
That's a nice thought.
And that's it. It's just really simple, but it's just like all these things, just like this slight zoom out where you get out of the present moment and you just sort of say, what's really happening here? What is this all about? And who am I connected to? And those moments end up being like the oxygen of the ecosystem, like constantly grounding in those moments, which modern life pushes us out of, right? But those moments end up being really nourishing.
All right, we have just a few moments here. Final thoughts you would like to share with anyone who's considering what they can do to flourish.
Yeah, it's not a massive. I guess what I've found in my experience here is it's not a massive lift. It's more like a slight rechanneling where you're trying to find these moments. That's one theme. The other is that things that seem stupid are actually smart. Things that seem like a waste of time, like it might have seemed like a waste of time to do that pause, but yet that ends up being very nourishing and good.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Daniel Coyle, the author of Flourish, speaking at the Cuyahoga County Public Library's Parma Snow Branch tomorrow night, February 12th at 7 p.m. Thanks for the time, Daniel.
Thanks, Stephanie.
We appreciate it. That brings us to the end of the show today. If you missed any part of the show, you can hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU. You can also get every episode of The Sound of Ideas on demand wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org or leave us a comment on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Yesterday, we learned about how K-12 students are using AI in the classroom and heard this feedback from Tom. We need to have a legal framework that accommodates the possibility that AI will put millions of us out of our jobs. The case for a universal basic income based on job displacement paid for by AI has never been clearer. Even if it never happens, we need the framework in place to avoid widespread poverty if it does happen. Thank you for that thought, Tom. Marvin also wrote in, I can understand the importance of learning how to use AI early, and I'm probably putting myself at a disadvantage, but I personally am boycotting AI until the companies can create, train, and implement their systems in an ethical and sustainable way. Marvin, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we continue our week-long look at how artificial intelligence is impacting our lives with a look at how medical institutions like the Cleveland Clinic are relying on AI in their work. Plus, our music podcast, Shuffle, explores the use of AI by musicians. Now remember, next week on Tuesday night, February 17th, we're inviting you here to our home in Playhouse Square for a live show focusing on AI and how it's being used in Northeast Ohio. It's free to attend. We just need you to register at ideastream.org/community tour. I really hope to see you there. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for keeping the conversation going. We will see you back here tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas.